Can I sit down? Is it okay? I don't like standing up like this. Okay, so I often wonder where to start, so I think I just have to start at the beginning. In 2010, my son was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia at the age of 10. He went on a traditional trip of normal chemotherapy, things like that. When he was 12 years old, he was diagnosed with a second cancer called Langerhans cell sarcoma, and this made him the only person in the entire world to have these two cancers together. So unfortunately, they had no protocol for Darren. They didn't know what to give him. They didn't know the treatments to give him. So they gave him everything they could without killing him. He had adult doses of every single chemotherapy drug going. It was actually yesterday, 6 years ago yesterday, he had his first bone marrow transplant. And unfortunately, it failed, as did the second one and the third one. And then he had his fourth and final bone marrow transplant in October 2013. And we were told that if it didn't work, there was no chance of it ever, he had no more other chances. So fast forward, he had the transplant, and 3 days later he trapped his fingers down the side of the bed and picked up 2 catastrophic infections in his hand and 1 in his mouth. Unfortunately, this brand new functioning bone marrow just couldn't take, and so by day 46 Darren was sent to a hospice with 3 days to live. We were told that nobody had ever engrafted with a bone marrow transplant after 50 days. So it gets to 50 days, it's never, ever, ever going to happen. So day 46, no functioning bone marrow, 3 catastrophic infections. And we were told that the only thing keeping him alive was the antibiotics that he was hooked up to. So we took him off the antibiotics and moved to an end-of-life hospice where I signed do not resuscitate forms. We planned his funeral. We planned everything. Unfortunately, I say unfortunately, but Darren didn't die immediately, and he certainly didn't go within the first 3 days that they'd said. So unfortunately, Darren started to get quite anxious. His organs started to shut down, and things weren't going very well for him. So they started to up the morphine. Now, Darren had told me that he didn't want to die in a haze of morphine. He's written a death plan to say that they took everything else from him. They weren't taking his death. He wanted to experience that. So as I saw them increasing the morphine, I had to make a decision that I had to think of another way, something else to give him. So I asked them to take the morphine away, and then he became very agitated. Now, at this point, Darren was still alive. This was day 69, and he was still here. So I asked for a bone marrow aspirate to be done, which they take in the hip bone. They take a small amount of bone marrow out, and they can look at it. And they told me on day 69 there was absolutely nothing there. We just had to wait for something to kill him. Darren started to get very anxious, and so I looked at natural alternatives to anxiety and things like that, and obviously cannabis came up. Now, a couple of months previously, Darren had the infection in his hand had caused his hand, basically it was necrotic and it was dying, and it was so painful that they wanted to amputate his hand, and I begged them not to. And so I asked them to do what is called a neurectomy, where down here they take out the nerves and they sever them, so he couldn't feel his hand any longer. But before I allowed them to do that, I looked at natural pain alternatives, and Bedrocan came up, which is a cannabis-based product available in Holland. But I was told it wasn't licensed for children, so we couldn't even look at that route. So he obviously had to have his hand, he had to have the neurectomy instead. But at that point, I'd looked and thought, well, what's the ingredient? It's cannabis. Surely I can get hold of some of that. So I did. I found a dealer, and I got some cannabis, and we made a tincture. And I put it in a vape pen for him, but unfortunately it wasn't strong enough. And so for me, I tried and failed, and we moved on. So now at this point, months later, Darren's in the hospice and he's very, very anxious, and obviously cannabis has come up again. So I just thought, oh, I've got nothing to lose here. So I drew up 5 ml of this tincture and I put it under his tongue. And within half an hour, everything just changed. His whole demeanor just changed. The nurse turned up with a drug that he'd become very addicted to, and he told them to take it away. He didn't want it anymore. He had no more morphine. He had no more sleeping tablets. He was just on cannabis. And this was day 70 that I started this. 5 days later, one of his bandages came off his hand, and his finger had healed, which is impossible. You can't do that without functioning bone marrow. So they did a blood test, and his bone marrow had kicked in. 5 days after I gave him the cannabis, his bone marrow had kicked in. They said that this is impossible. They called him a miracle. The doctors had no idea how this had happened, what had happened. Any of the drugs they'd given him, he was only on palliative care. There was nothing. Obviously, I knew this wasn't a miracle. I knew this was cannabis, but I couldn't tell them because at this point, I was absolutely terrified of social services coming and taking my children. And not only would they take my children, but Darren would now lose the one thing that had actually worked for him after everything else had failed. So we carried on, and I carried on, and every time I gave the cannabis, his blood count doubled. And it got to a point where I thought to myself, I have only one chance here to prove that this is not a coincidence. And I didn't ever want anyone to tell me it was. So I took the cannabis away and his blood halved. I gave it back and they doubled. I took it away and they halved. And I watched that over a 6 blood test period of time. I knew for a fact that this cannabis had an incredible effect on his immune system. So fast forward, we were then evicted from the hospice because he didn't die, and obviously a palliative care hospice is not a place for someone who's not dying. But unfortunately, because Darren had planned everything and he wanted an end to the suffering, he then tried to kill himself. His mental health deteriorated so chronically that he tried to starve himself to death over a period of 6 months. He got down to 23 kilos, and he was 14 at the time. And the hospital's answer to this was to section him, sedate him, and force feed him because apparently he didn't qualify for any mental health care. So I begged them to let me take him to Spain. And I said that if I took him to Spain and I came back and he was still as bad, I would sign him over to them. So I took him to Spain, and that's where I met a guy called Jeff Ditchfield, who many people here will know who he is. And Jeff gave us 1 mil of oil, the famous, the RSO, the FICO, whatever you want to call it, and told me to put a tiny little bit in Darren's mouth the following day. So I put a little bit on a cracker, and within half an hour, Darren was sat down by the pool with his brother, and I shouted down, "I'm preparing some lunch. Does anybody want any?" And thinking I was going to get the same retort that I had for the last 6 months, which was just a grunt. And Darren shouted up, "Yeah, make me loads, I'm starving." So I cried, obviously, and I made him lots of food. And for that day, he ate for 12 hours. The next day, he ate for 12 hours. And the next, and the next, and the next. I was having to go down to the supermarket every 10 minutes to restock. He was just eating me out of house and home. So we spent 10 days of him doing that. I took him back to hospital. His lead oncologist took me to one side and said, "My God, his mental health has improved by 300%. And I said, "I know." And she said, "And he doesn't want to die anymore." I said, "No, I know." And she said, "He's put on 4 kilos. I said, "Yeah, I know." And she said, "The holiday did him the world of good." And I said, "Yes, it was the holiday." Again, no way I could tell them what I'd done. I couldn't. It was too much of a risk. So I waited and I waited, but immediately, because Darren was so rare, he already had a huge following on social media. So when he got this miracle, I became inundated by people, parents in the same situation as me, wanting to know what miracle I'd given to my son. So I told them, secretly, it was cannabis. To which I was told by many of the parents, "Oh, I can't do that, it's illegal, I can't. And the law terrified them. To me, the law, if a law is unjust, you have a moral obligation to break it. And for me, if it's healed my son and saved his life when everything else failed, then it's not a law that I wish to abide by. So I continue to help him, and every single day for the last 5.5 years, Darren has had oil. Now, his neurectomy in his hand, where they told me that it was irreparable and that he would never use his hands again, he was left like this. They said, he'll never use his hand. Well, now, 5.5 years later, he has full range of movement in his hand. The only things he can't feel are the very tips of his fingers. It's called neurogenesis. I've taken him to his oncologist. I've literally slapped his hand on the desk, and I've asked them to explain this to me, and they can't. I explain to them about neurogenesis. He's also had avascular necrosis in his right femur, where an inch of bone was dead. They told me he'd need a knee replacement. This is irreparable. He had a scan about 6 months ago, and guess what? It's gone. It's healed his bones. We are now looking at long-term side effects of the radiotherapy and chemotherapy that he had. He should be infertile. He should have heart failure, liver failure. He should have cataracts by now. And he is the opposite. Everything they're seeing is absolutely the opposite of what they're expecting. Everything is fine. He's healed. He's going for a test next month for his fertility because he'll be 20 this year, and he wants to know whether or not he's infertile. And I've said to him, please don't, with you, Darren, probably not. So let's not, rest on our laurels. But to me, I am so incredibly infuriated with the medical profession in this country and the people who run this country, because it works. I've seen it with my own eyes, and I've seen it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times since, because since that fateful day, I have helped hundreds of people. With my very, very close friend JJ here at the front, we get illegal oils to people who come to us. When people come to me and say, I've got stage 4 pancreatic cancer, I'm looking at cannabis oil, can you help me? I can't say no, because I can. And if I can help someone and I don't, I'm a monster, and I'm not one of those. So I risk 14 years in prison every single day for talking to people and aiding them with illegal cannabis oils. And I will continue to do so until this law changes, because people deserve this, and people deserve to have access to lab-tested oils. You know, everything I do is as clinical as I possibly can in an illegal market. So since then, I know just how many miracles. It is literally miraculous what this plant can do. And I see it time and time again. And so I'm here to hopefully spread the knowledge and educate people into the truth about cannabis and actually what it can do. Because I do believe that we are the people, we are the many, they are the few. And if enough of us stand up and say, we want this and we need THC, we need everything. I mean, this is incredible. This is obviously, this is very much within the legal remit of this country. And this is incredible to see this. But this is not enough. We need more than this. We deserve more than this. So as this is a great start, we've got to do more. I think I'll leave it there. I'm more of an interactive person. I like to have questions thrown at me. So I'd really, really love to have some questions thrown at me from the audience. Go on, Free.
From what you're saying, you're talking about the law is wrong. Surely the legislation is criminal. Yeah. And when are these criminals who are poisoning people and denying medicine going to be brought to trial? And are you or any other people you know actually, bringing these people to justice? It's
a difficult one, because how do we do that? So, I mean, there's lots and lots of different ways that we can be activists in this market, and I suppose we all have our niche place. And my place is I'm a proactive, direct action activist. So I literally help people when they are dying, and I spend all of my time doing that. So I can't really do any more than that. I've been to Parliament, I've spoken to ministers, I was arrested outside Parliament a couple of years ago, protesting. I do everything I can. I am so open and honest, all over Facebook. Everybody knows. The police know that I break the law, and I'm very blatant about it, because I feel if they want to come and they want to arrest me, then they can. And I will make sure that I'm very loud about it, and I was, I'm not going to go down without a fight. So if they want to arrest me, they can. But I honestly don't think they will, because I think that if they arrested me, I think it could cause, they don't want the publicity. They go after low-hanging fruit, and I'm not one of those at the moment. So as much as I would love to bring these people, if I knew how to do that, I'd be all over it. So thank you.
Is there any further questions?
Don't leave me hanging. Or I'll start singing, and you don't want that.
Questions, please, come on. Yeah. Here, also here.
So, judging by this event, obviously we're seeing that CBD is very much evolving in Britain. In a post-Brexit economy, when we lose the status of CBD, where do you see the future of this? Do you think it could become as illegal as THC again?
What worries me with Brexit, on a totally different kind of going off on one, is that if there was a decent government in charge, I'd be quite happy for that government to run us. But unfortunately, we're going to be heading into very difficult waters, I think, with the fact that we've got the Tories in charge. And that worries me. That really, really worries me, because obviously Theresa May, up until a year ago, was saying that cannabis had no medicinal benefit, while her husband was raking it in, being the biggest investor in GW Pharmaceuticals. So, either has or it hasn't. The hypocrisy in this country is deafening, and it's sickening, and I honestly don't understand how they're getting away with it. And but it really, really does concern me that we could follow suit, and CBD could then end up, and all these people who, have benefited from CBD, if they take it off the market, will become criminals like me. So then maybe we'll have loads of fighters. Yeah. So maybe if they did make CBD illegal, it might actually push the movement forward. I don't know. That's the only positive I could really see out of that, is it would create an army of people that now know that cannabis works for them, yet now it's illegal, so they'll see it for themselves. Yep. Lady there.
Callie, I've got a question here from this gentleman over here. I'm just here. Here we are.
Okay.
And it's related to the first question, so just give me a moment.
Okay, go on,
Yeah,
Phil.
the first gentleman's question was whether anyone's going to hold the government to account for their lies about cannabis. Well, I'm going to try and do exactly the same thing, actually.
Yeah.
I founded a group called We the Undersigned Have a Human Sovereign Right to Cannabis, and I finally found a solicitor
Yeah.
that's willing to look at the case.
Go on, Phil, Monk.
All I need now, really, is the community to get behind us. Everyone put a few quid in the kitty so we can actually afford the legal fees to try and get the solicitor to review the case that I hope to put together to go and take them and hold them account for their lies and their conflicted interest, and hopefully just get this changed, because in my opinion, you guys can all grow your seeds and make your money, that's marvellous, but I should be able to grow my house for myself
exactly.
and not be prosecuted for it for no profit,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm fighting for.
Yeah.
So that's your answer to your first question, free cannabis.
Thank you, Phil. Yeah,
Thank you
anybody
very much.
go
Any further
follow,
questions, please put your hand up.
Go follow Phil Monk and We the Undersigned. He's working tirelessly to try and and like I say, when there's a splinter, there's so many of us activists that do so many different things, and Phil is just one guy who does incredible work. So yeah, follow him absolutely.
Okay,
There's a lady there.
oh,
How long we
sorry.
got?
Was
I know
this
I
lady
could talk
first?
all day.
Here we go.
Hi, I'm Dana. I'm from Positive TV and another magazine called the Green Queen magazine.
Oh, okay, hello.
And I'm just really exploring cannabis here, and it's been so amazing to hear the story of how much it's healed your son.
Thank
who
you.
had bone marrow and all those other complexities. I'd love to know the parents and people that are contacting you. What kind of ailments are you helping? Because I'd love to know more about that. You could give me some examples.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything, obviously, when I first started this, when I first came, it was a lot of cancer. There was a lot of cancer. Now, there's still cancers, and we're looking at a lot of brain tumours in children. There's a lot of epileptics. We're getting many ADHD, autism, Tourette's. I mean, my own son has autism, Tourette's, and ADHD, and I find it works incredibly well for that too. It's a plethora, anything you can imagine. And we're seeing lots of cancers that are adult cancers in babies. And so because you're involved in this, you kind of see the real dark side of there's so many poorly people in this country right now. So many people suffering needlessly when they don't have to. They shouldn't be left to suffer when there's an alternative out there which works and has minimal detrimental side effects. You know, why are we still being forced to go down the route of poison that has the absolute opposite effect? You know, we should be allowed an option right at the beginning. I don't want to see these people coming to me saying, I've just been given 3 weeks to live. I want them coming to me saying, I've just been diagnosed. They're the ones that I want, because they're the ones that have the best chance, you know? So yeah, thank you.
Any further questions, ladies and gentlemen? Oh, there's a gentleman over here.
Hi, Callie.
Hello.
Do you think it's fair that somebody who could grow 9 plants or more could get years in prison, yet somebody who rapes a child can get 6 months or less, a new identity and a new address?
It's part of the hypocrisy of this country, and it's part of it's absolutely disgusting. I believe that the CPS guideline is 27 plants. The CPS guideline is 27 plants of prosecution. So you could technically push your luck, but no, it's absolutely wrong that there's 9 plants, there's no harm. And look at America, the prisons are full of people that have done non-violent crimes, and yet you've got people who are an absolute menace to society who are allowed to walk around. It's wrong. It's another thing that's wrong in this country.
Thank you very much. Any more
You're
questions for Callie?
I don't mind.
Hold on, sir. Or forced questions in this case, I think it looks like.
Hello.
Hello.
It's fantastic hearing your story.
Thank you.
My son has autism and has recently been diagnosed with bipolar.
Okay.
And I've tried so many things over the years.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few things that have worked and would still work, and they're fantastic. One of them is diet.
Absolutely. Good.
But-
I'm glad you brought that up.
But he's on medication for his bipolar, but I've been toying with this idea of using CBD for this same condition with the autism and the bipolar, and I'm wondering, does it need just CBD or THC, or what kind of strengths, and just to hear someone like you talk about their own story, it's just
Thank you.
Amazing.
It's absolutely impossible for me to say what your son would need. We have an endocannabinoid system, and our endocannabinoid systems are like fingerprints. So we're all very different. What would work for my son might not work for yours. But what I would say, I always recommend people, if they can, if they've got cancer, straight away you have to have THC, no doubt about it. The ratios will differ depending on the cancer, but for things like autism, try CBD first. Don't break the law unless you have to, because it's another stress that you don't need in your life. So try CBD. Just try him, build him up slowly, find a good quality CBD. There's too many CBD producers in this country that aren't very good. So I'm hoping that we do start seeing standards, because we deserve standards, you know? So I would definitely suggest, don't keep toying with the idea, just do it. Do it. You've got nothing to lose. It's not illegal. It's not going to hurt him. So just try it and see, because if you don't know, you won't. If you don't try, you won't know. But I'm glad you brought up diet, because we have to ensure, with any illness, we have to ensure that we're making sure that our bodies can do the best that they can do before we start looking at everything else. If we're eating an incredibly bad diet and we're not drinking enough water, we're drinking lots of alcohol, doing other drugs like cocaine, things like that, our bodies are going to be... They can't look after themselves. So we have to make sure that our bodies are in fit and, as healthy as they can be. And it will, an overall picture, it's holistic. Cannabis is holistic. It can only do so much. If you're going to poison it with one hand and try and heal it with the other, it's not going to work.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've run out of time for questions, but I know that Callie is wandering around the expo all weekend, so please catch her. Please put your hands together for Callie Blackwell. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I do have some books down here. Yours are upstairs in the hotel room, so it's fine. Thank you.